Call the meeting to order. We'll begin with item number 2, which is adoption of the agenda and AB 361 finding. And for that, I'll turn it over to Keith Lemieux.
There we go. Okay, so this is the same resolution that you've had in the past. It just continues the ability, I shouldn't say, it's not a resolution, I'm sorry. It's the same findings, it's the findings of the prior resolution that you made that will allow you to continue to use the enhanced electronic format for these meetings. Because we have a quorum physically present here, we actually qualify under the original format, but this also will allow the PAC and TAC to continue to meet electronically as well.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Next, we'll hear public comment on the...
We need to...
Oh, we need a... Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, is there a motion to approve item number 2?
Yes, John White, I'll make a motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor... Oh, sorry, April, go ahead and have a roll
Chairman
call vote.
Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Heyman,
Aye.
Director Itnyer,
Aye.
Director Ratora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Okay, now we'll hear public comment on the closed session agenda. Speakers have 3 minutes. Please state your name before making your presentation. We'll begin with members of public in attendance, which doesn't look like we have any at this time. And then we'll go to the phones. Is there anybody on the phones right now that would like to speak to closed session? Okay, not seeing any. We'll go ahead and adjourn to closed session, and we'll return at 11 a.m. We'll reconvene, and we'll begin with a report on closed session from Mr. Lemieux.
Sure. Board met in closed session to discuss the items identified on the closed session. There is one reportable action that took place with regard to the item identified as IWVGA versus Inyokern CSD. The board authorized a legal agreement with my new law firm, Alshire and Winder, for representation of the GA in that matter. No other reportable action took place. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. If everybody would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and next we will call the roll.
Chairman Peters,
Here?
Vice Chair Heyman,
Present.
Director Itnyer,
Here.
Director Ratora,
Here.
Director Vallejo.
Present.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 6, public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda but under the jurisdiction of the board. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Please state your name before making your presentation. Is there anyone that would like to speak on a matter not on this agenda?
Hi, my name is Tim Carroll, and I'm a member of the Inyokern Community Services District. I'm not a very good speaker, but I've had a lot of experience solving technical problems, and sometimes it's the organization that makes solving technical problems more difficult. Among the things I want to criticize today is you have filed a lawsuit against our Community Services District, and I'd respectfully ask that you withdraw it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak?
Judy Decker, member of the Policy Advisory Committee, Vice President of the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District, resident of Ridgecrest, and a private well owner. It has come to our attention that about a third of the houses that are on West Ridgecrest Boulevard between Jack's Ranch Road and 395 have changed hands or will change hands recently, currently. And you're going to talk about one of them later today, but the thought occurred to me that while the PAC is working again on your communications plan, that you should move ahead and put together some sort of little package to send to these new people who are moving in, who undoubtedly know nothing about the GA. And I've been thinking about this for a couple of days after we met one of them, quite by accident because he got lost. But I think a small package, simple, by you, sent to them, would be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public speakers? Okay, seeing none in here, we'll go to the phones. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and conclude public comments and move to board member comments. Are there any members of the board who would like to share? Okay, that brings us to the consent agenda. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak to the board regarding an item on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, are there any comments from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion on staff's recommendation.
So move.
Second.
Thank you.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Our next item is number 9, a report on Executive Order N-7-22. And after that, I will turn to Mr. Lemieux.
Sure, and this will be a brief information report only, but there's been a little talk about this topic, so I thought I would inform the board specifically about it if you weren't already aware. So the governor signed a new executive order related to the drought, and Section 9 of that order directly pertains to the GA and the GA's responsibilities, and I just wanted to draw your attention to that. You have a written report that sort of describes the executive order generally, but the part that's of particular interest to both the counties that are serving on the board, the city, and also the GA is that under the executive order, if there's going to be any permit approved for a new groundwater well or for an alteration to an existing groundwater well in this basin, that before that approval can happen, the groundwater sustainability is supposed to weigh in on a couple issues regarding the well. The GA has to determine that it's not likely to interfere with the production of any existing wells, not likely to cause subsidence, and that it will not decrease the likelihood of achieving our GSP. Importantly, that this rule does not apply to de minimis wells as long as they're for domestic use, so less than 2 acre-feet per year for domestic use, and it also doesn't apply to wells to supply public water systems such as the water district. So, so it's really, these are private wells, non-domestic, non-de minimis. Okay. I don't know if we've got much of that in the pike, coming down the pike, but just as a heads up that that's a new requirement, and so we will need to work cooperatively with the city and the county in the event that we have those kinds of applications coming forward. Mr. Chair, that unless there's any questions, that concludes the report.
Is there a time limit on this?
You mean how long is this going to last?
Yes.
The executive order, I don't think has a timeout on it, so it will last until it's revoked by the governor.
Okay.
Okay, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on item 9? Anyone on the phones? Okay, any other comments from the board? Okay. And just to be clear, we don't need a motion to receive and file this, do we? Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, so our next item is item 10, and that is Resolution 03-22, authorizing staff to continue banking with Alta One Federal Credit Union in place of Mission Bank. And do we have somebody here to make that report? Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and call on Gina.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. Yes, we're presenting a resolution as a result of the acquisition of Mission Bank, Ridgecrest Bank branch by Alta One Federal Credit Union. Staff is recommending continuing banking services with Alta One in order to have a consistent financial management in place. The transition occurs officially for banking customers on May 2nd. The resolution presented is an acknowledgement of the acquisition to the board and the GA staff recommendation to continue banking services. GA staff will review the banking services of Alta One and return with additional actions in the coming months related to updates for accounts, account signers, administrator designations, as well as performance. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Gina. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, any questions or comments from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Next item is number 11, abandonment of the following program due to lack of funding. And for that, I will turn it back over to April.
Thank you, Chairman. At the August 20th, 2020 IWJ regular board meeting, the authority unanimously approved Resolution 0520 regarding a transient pool and fallowing program. Thereafter, 7 agricultural pumpers within the basin had joined the transient pool. The transient pool was a one-time quantity of water to allow for equitable sunsetting of their agricultural operations. The total amount of water in the transient pool is 51,000 acre feet, which is equivalent to the total amount of groundwater that will be overdrafted from the basin by long-term import water users during the time they're obtaining and bringing in their needed import supply. The fallowing program was an opportunity for those agricultural users to sell their transient pool allotment in lieu of pumping their pool water. The major benefit of the fallowing program to long-term users, such as the Indian Wells Valley Water District and Sales Valley Minerals, was the amount of time in which the required import water supply needed to be obtained could have been extended with the purchase of transient pool allocations. Since time of the adoption of a transient pool and fallowing program, Indian Wells Valley Water District has expressed zero interest in supporting the fallowing program using replenishment fee dollars, rendering the program ineffective. The staff recommends at this time that the board approve the attached letter to be sent to the Water District Board for a final discussion and decision as to whether they wish to approve fallowing program funding using replenishment fee dollars. And that is the end of my report.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for board comments or a motion.
At one point in time, it seemed to me we put an addendum to that following program in that we were going to allow farmer-to-farmer transfer or purchase, or a purchase from anyone who was a short time user? What does this do to that? That is, if we were to terminate the program.
There we go. Director Retora, could you repeat your question?
At one point in time, we authorized farmers to buy the transient pool from, or transfer the transient pool from farmer to farmer or between any short-term user that had an allocation or any short-term user who didn't have an allocation perhaps, who was a short-term user. And so I'm curious, even though there's not money for the GA to purchase the transient pool, there may still be other individuals who would want to purchase the transient pool.
Yeah, this doesn't speak to that. This isn't, the fallowing program is separate from the transient pool or transfers within the transient pool. Those, if they're contemplated, could still potentially exist in the absence of the fallowing program.
Okay, so this is really just sending a letter to the water district as opposed to taking any action on the transient pool or the fallowing program.
Correct.
Okay. Second question is, do we know what the cost would be if the water district agreed to spend or use the replenishment fee to purchase the transient pool?
It would depend on which and how many of the rights holders would want to participate.
I couldn't agree more, but do we have any idea? Right now, there's not a lot of money in the replenishment fee. We need that for the imported water, if we are able to find imported water. When I look at our financial statements, I don't see us being able to use the replenishment fee for, I mean, we can only spend that money once. I mean, that's the real problem. If we spend the money, the replenishment fee money on the transient pool, it's not going to be there when we want to import water, if we can find imported water. So the question really is, what's the financial risk and where is this going? Where are we going to end up if we spend all of our money on transient pool?
Well, you're correct that the money that we have, that we've collected currently through the replenishment fee is going towards purchasing water. So if the primary beneficiary of the fallowing program was intended to be the water district, so the water district would have to separately fund that if that's what the water district wanted to do. So that would be in addition to the
So you're talking additional funds?
Correct.
And I guess I didn't understand that from reading the letter.
Yes.
But that is the intent.
That's correct.
Okay, I don't believe that is clear in the letter. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Okay, it looks like somebody called in a minute ago, so we'll go ahead and take that caller now. Go ahead, caller. Caller, go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, this is Renee West-Delusk. I guess I need some clarification. I'm kind of confused. Like, what's going to happen? I remember as a PAC member, I had to review a fallowing program a while back, but I don't see how we can do without it. we have to fund it some way. Like, I wasn't really clear how it was going to be funded in the first place, but I think we need a fallowing program, and I'm worried about not having one because I'm worried about dust bowl situations and things like that. And that's my comment. If you can please answer the question, thank you.
Is there anybody that'd like to field that? Do you have anything to add, Keith?
Well, I think the question is, how do we do without it? And that sounds like a policy question, not a legal question.
Okay, yeah, I think that will be determined in staff conversations as we go forward.
I believe she was speaking relative to the environmental effects associated with not properly fallowing the land, because we could end up as a dust bowl if we don't do something. I'm not sure that was that aspect of this. I mean, isn't there a separate effort for doing fallowing?
Yeah, I guess it's correct that the environmental effects of land going out of production is something that we would be addressing separately, not through this program.
Yes.
Okay, sure. We got one more public speaker.
Oh, there we go. Josh Nugent, Mojave Pistachios. I just had two things on the financial side of the fallowing program. I think early on it mentioned Mojave would be, in addition to the water district, a potential buyer of other people's rights. And one of the hindrances to that was some of the legal waivers that you had to sign in order to enter into the transient pool to make the transfer in the fallowing program. It was pretty onerous, and so it was kind of precluded participation in it. But then separately, I think to Renee's point, I think I was on with some of those committees. There's some farm ground that's already been fallowed because people couldn't afford to pay the fees, and there's potentially going to be more, depending on how the legal cases play out. So as far as the area is concerned, I think that is a concern, is if someone's either forced out or decides to leave, then there probably does need to be some amount of water, or in my mind, the East Kern RCD would be a perfect person to help with that, where you reseed or do something. We actually bought the Neal Ranch, which the water district had before, that had a lot of sand blowing problems, and through basically a little bit of land management and a couple of wet winters, we were able to get that to kind of reseed, and that's reduced the blowing in that area. But I think all you need to do is look at the sea of orange wind fence whenever you come in from that field that had caught all the major blows, because it wasn't tied down correctly, to see the potential for dewatering, 2,000 to 3,000 acres of agriculture in an area over a short amount of time without providing people the economic out to be able to take care of the land as they exit would cause a potential huge environmental concern for the area. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments from the board? Okay, we have one more public comment.
Yes. This whole issue has been confusing, perhaps deliberately so, I don't know, from the very beginning, because Josh can correct me if I'm wrong. Fallowing is not abandoning land. When a farmer fallows a field, he does so for perhaps a season and then replants it. And Renee and everyone else, including myself, who wrote very strong letters during the GSP process about calling this fallowing. And people are confused, even your board is confused, because you have tied transient water supply pumping with fallowing. I do recall bringing this up at a prior meeting and asking the question, how's this fallowing, so-called fallowing or walking away from a farm, how is it going to be dealt with? And when I asked the question, the Navy, I don't believe it was you, your predecessor, was very concerned. We are all, well, I don't think you were here, Mr. Peters, or Mr. Lemieux, but the rest of us were here on Monday, and the paper says we had 70-mile-an-hour winds. What do you think is going to happen to abandoned land that in those windstorms? It's going to be a terrible, terrible problem, and it needs to be seriously addressed. I remember asking the question when Mr. Hall was the attorney for the GA board, who answered me by saying that will be up to the landowner. That is it right there is a serious problem. It's something that you need to take up seriously as a subject and discuss it and come up with a viable solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tim Carroll again. One of my big problems is once I start talking, maybe I end up talking too much. It's an example of a real problem, kind of maybe not adequately understood or whatever. Anyway, organizations can have very good intentions of solving problems, but might be missing the substance of critical issues. I've been involved in designing many kinds of power plants, including commercial nuclear power plants and whatnot, and organizations want to minimize their liability and maybe, have a good story to go with the decisions they make and the actions they take, but, end up being a big problem. I'm retired, but a few years ago I was asked to be on this community services district, and I volunteered. I'm a volunteer member. And I also was asked to go down and help Edwards solve some of their grid stability issues and, power conditioning issues, ride through transients and that sort of thing. Worked with Edison. I also worked on base to recondition several old remote microgrids. And I worked on a microgrid for Edwards. Anyway, there are risks that can be talked away. Like Keith mentioned that it's a policy issue. And, the members of the policy committee have actually not had much opportunity to advise on policy, and that's a problem. So, again, I'm stating that, you can have the power or the authority to do things like make decisions and not realize that you're, cutting off water to a small community, for instance, or threatening to. So, just because you can sick lawyers on a small town doesn't mean you should. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with the speakers who were concerned about the environmental issues. And I think probably all are. None of us want to see a dust bowl. But getting back to the subject at hand, which I think is the letter, I don't believe that the letter is clear enough to actually get a response from the water district. What is really being asked? What are the options? What are we asking the water district to do, and what does the water district get for that? So it's not clear in my mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
As a technical matter, the fallowing program is included in the GSP, is it not? And the GSP has been approved. Is there any risk to a repercussion from DWR by removing it from the GSP that they approved? Because assuming that they approved a holistic plan that addressed many different issues. So I don't have an opinion. I'm just asking, if you understand the ramifications of it.
Thank you. Mr. Lemieux, would you like to?
Well, you're asking me what the DWR might think of this. And I just don't know the answer to that question.
It's my understanding that this would just send a letter, and then that would initiate further discussion with the water district. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. Yeah, this does not, just for clarity, this does not end the following program per se. It's trying to get clarity from, we in our staff conversations have heard messages relayed back from the water district on this topic, which gave us the impression the water district was not interested in continuing to pursue the following program. But before we took any step on that, we realized that we had not really heard anything formally from the board, and we want to be fair to the water district about it. So this is really just an effort to get some clarity from the water district on their position on the following program. If the letter is not clear enough in that, I mean, really, that's all it really needs to say is what is the district's position on the following program. That's what it's meant. That's really the whole message, and that's what we're looking for an answer on.
To address one of the earlier questions, my understanding is that the GSP was not subject to environmental approval.
Correct.
It's the actions that result from implementing it that would be subject to environmental approval. So
Provided that they count as projects under CEQA.
yeah.
So there's
So sooner
certainly-
or later, it's going to become an issue. I mean, no question about it, when we start taking land out of production. But that's the thing that's going to have to be reviewed, it seems to me.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of straying away from the topic at hand, which is basically just directing water district and staff to continue that conversation. So that being said, is there any other comment from the board?
Chairman Peters, this is Steve, if I might, for just for a little clarification.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure people are aware, especially Director Retora, that part of this arose out of some small ag folks asking basically what happened to the fallowing program. It was in the GSP, and they were interested in not continuing their agricultural operations and possibly negotiating a price. No prices have been discussed. There was a question about how much this will cost. Nobody knows because you haven't even discussed price yet. But they were basically interested in potentially negotiating with the groundwater authority to basically wipe their transient pool allotments off the table, and they wouldn't be pumped. And there's a price. I mean, there's a benefit for that, whether it's $1 or $1,000 or $50, but there is a price for it, and there's a benefit to taking that pumping off of the table so that it doesn't further deplete the basin. So that's where it came up, and there's been an issue in a discussion about how to fund it. I think Bill Hall has indicated that potentially the replenishment fee could be used for that and be justified based upon legal reasons, but there was concerns from the water district about what the water district benefit is for that. And so I think that's where this needs to go. And the real goal here is to try to give answers to these small ag folks as to whether there is an opportunity for them to negotiate a price for not pumping their transient pool water or not. The idea of them transferring is still on the transient pool program.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any other comments before we call for a motion?
Yeah, and I just want to clarify comments I made earlier. So currently, obviously, the only party paying the replenishment fee is the water district. Currently, the replenishment fee is only being used to pay for administrative costs and the cost of acquiring water. That's what we've put it to now. When we discussed using the replenishment fee for the following purpose, we had pushback from the water district, as I understand it. Now, the complicating factor also is that presumably shortly, when we get a court ruling, there will be other parties paying the replenishment fee too. So we need to take a look at the benefit analysis of the following program in that context as well. So that's the point I was making earlier. So the fee amount was calculated based on the cost of acquiring water. If this is going to include the following program, as the replenishment fee is going to include the following program, then we're going to need to do that analysis.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Is there any other comments or a motion on staff's recommendation?
This is John Blejo. I'm just wondering, to avoid us spinning wheels and sending a letter to the water district where the water district representative is saying he doesn't know what it's asking. Guess what? And in the scenario being that we get a response back that, what are you actually asking? I mean, is there something more specific that the water district representative would like to have us include in this letter, like something specific?
I couldn't hear him well enough to respond.
I believe his question was, is there something in particular that the water district would like to see for clarification purposes in the letter to?
Well, we were told early on that the water district could not actually purchase the transient pool because we're not a short-term user.
Correct.
And I don't see how, based upon this letter, anything has changed from that position.
Yeah, just for clarity, the transient pool is separate, as a totally
Yeah,
separate issue.
We're already paying, probably the only agency on this board that's paying money in. Us and the farmers are paying all the fees. So to ask us to pay additional fees, I think, especially without saying, defining what this letter really wants to say, we need to figure out what it is that this board wants to ask the water district. And it's not clear.
So, Director Rotora, I would, really the question, the ask is the last paragraph. That I would direct your attention to that last paragraph. If that question is not clear to you, then is there something we can do to make the question clearer? So as to avoid another round of back
Can you
and forth.
speak into your microphone?
Oh, did I not come in on the mic? Okay, sorry about that. I have a habit of turning my head when I'm up here to look at you. The question that the GA is asking the water district is contained in the last paragraph of that letter. If that question is not stated in a way that's clear to you, I would ask that you would suggest to us something we could do to make that more clear.
I think we're expecting the replenishment fee to be spent for Table A entitlement. I mean, I don't think that there's been any change in our position there. I guess there's no reason for you to ask, not to ask. I don't see why, if we spend that money on something other than Table A entitlement, that just means the water district has to spend more money again on Table A entitlement. So you're asking us to spend more money.
Let me hop in there.
That's the issue is,
Director, this isn't asking the water district anything but to have a conversation about the following program. And I think we're getting off topic into something that's not
fine.
agendized.
I understand.
Perfect. So I think unless there's any other comments, we can call for a motion at this point. Would anyone like to make a motion on staff's recommendation?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay. I'll go ahead and make the second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
No.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item is number 12, and that is permanent transfer of the transient pool allotment. And for that, I will turn it back over to April.
Thank you. This report should be rather brief. On January 21st, 2021, the IWGA Board approved Resolution 0121, which acknowledges the allowance of a transfer of transient pool water to other parties under certain circumstances. On March 23rd, 2022, IWGA staff received a permanent transfer form for the Hickle property in the amount of 588 acre-feet. The Hickle agricultural operations have ceased before they entered the transient pool and have not resumed since. So the total amount of the transfer will be their complete allotment of 588 acre-feet. IWGA staff will make contact with the new owners to obtain updated well registration documents and discuss the monthly reporting and payments required of them as a member of the transient pool. At this time, there's no board action needed. This just serves as a receive and file.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item?
This is one of the new people I was referring to, so I'm glad you're going to contact them. However, I have a question about item number 11. It says abandonment of the fallowing program.
But we've already
And
concluded.
you voted to abandon the fallowing program. I
No.
want to make this clear to myself. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct. We voted to send a letter to the water district to have a discussion regarding that. But we've already closed public comment for 11, so we can't continue
All
discussing
right,
that.
but this is the way miscommunication gets going, because that's not what your agenda states. So I just want to point this out to you, because it's communication between individuals and different parties that make things go forward.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment on item 12? Okay, seeing none, any comments from the board?
I'm assuming the only thing we're doing is transferring the transient pool from one owner to the next owner is really the bottom line here?
That is correct. The transient pool allotment will be pumped at the existing address. They're just changing property owners.
Okay. And that is, I'm assuming, consistent with everything that is in our legal issues, right? Our
Correct.
ordinance?
This is really a ministerial act. We told them that if you're going to transfer it, that you need to give us notice so we can update our records essentially, but we don't have any, we did not require any kind of approval from the board in order to transfer, for this kind of transfer.
Okay, so there's really no issue here, basically.
Correct. This is just a
That's
notice.
what I thought. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And just to confirm, that's receive and file. We don't need a motion on that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. Okay, next up is item number 13, a report from our water resource manager. And for that, I will call on Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman Peters. Make sure I'm unmuted. I am unmuted, so I'm ready to go. We're ready to go. We'll try to keep this brief, and if we can, we'll try to do as we have done in the past and get through all the items A, B, and C, and then open up for public and then board comments and questions for sure. Today, there's one item that's not listed that we're gonna report on. I have Heather Steele on the line, so Heather's gonna report on submission of the annual report, just as a closure report, presentation report on the annual report for 2021. So Heather will do that. Joseph, who normally provides our grant funding and recycled water program report, is on vacation. So I think Jeff Helsley, either on or will be on shortly. So he and I will work together on the grant funding and the recycled water program. Jeff is very, very involved in the recycled water program, essentially, as I think you're aware and we reported in the past. The technical team working on that between the city, the water district, and the groundwater authority and us has been making a lot of progress, and Jeff's been in every one of those. So Jeff will report on that. G. Moran has also joined us. G. Moran has a few reports and updates on things that are going on in the basin. So to get started, Heather can maybe just give a quick update on what we did with the annual, how we finalized it, and how we got it submitted. Please.
Sure. Yes. This is just a quick update. We did submit the Water Year 2021 annual report to DWR. That has been posted on the website as well for the public to view. We did want to report as well that prior to submittal on March 24th, Stetson did have a staff call with DWR staff regarding the data collection issues that impacted calculating the change of storage for this year. And DWR staff, they definitely understood the issues that we explained to them, and they advised us to document those in the annual report, which we did. And we also discussed our next steps to how we're going to resolve this issue for next year and for this current spring, our data collection and field work that we've already completed. We discussed that with them, and they were definitely in agreement and understood, and everything was very positive. So we have submitted that report, and still on the other two reports, they have been reviewed, and we have not received any comments from DWR on those.
Yep.
That's just a quick update.
Great, Heather. Thank you. I'll just jump and add that, and this is just our observation. I mean, we're working, Heather and the other people here. I've been working with DWR staff, as you know, ever since before we submitted the GSP and certainly after the GSP. And I'll just as a report to the boards, it's a good report. I think our relationship with Groundwater Authority, the staff relationship with DWR's technical staff, which are responsible for the GSP and meeting the requirements of SGMA. Our relationship is very, very good with the technical staff. We're lockstep, and in addition to that, there is another set of staff that are working on the grants and loans and all the Prop 1, Prop 68 grants. And I just let the board know we are in good communication with them. Also, I think that that we have a very, very good relationship with all of the DWR staff right now, and there's some interesting activities, but I'll let you know the word back from DWR staff that I've received directly, one-on-one with DWR staff, is the folks at DWR are fully aware of where Indian Wells groundwater basin is and the Indian Wells Groundwater Authority and what we're trying to do here. So, and everything we hear right now is DWR staff is fully supportive of what we're doing. So just a positive report with these communications that we've been having with DWR staff. So moving on onto the agenda now, grant funding. Jeff, are you on by any chance yet? I don't think he is. So I will start.
If you're asking for Jeff Simonetti, I am on.
No, I'm sorry, Jeff. My Jeff Helsley.
No worries.
Okay. Yes. So there's PowerPoints up there. They're fairly self-explanatory. Joseph normally provides these. I'll mention up front that probably 2, maybe 3 meetings ago, we did provide a table, a summary table of Prop 1 and Prop 68 grants, all of the invoices, all of the payments, all of the retentions, and remaining funds, and what we were looking at to close out these grant funding opportunities numerically for each one of the tasks and each one of the invoices that have been submitted. So we're going to update that. I'll try to get that. We'll have that available for the May meeting. But for the current status, following the PowerPoint, invoice 12A, which covered July through September of 2021, fairly small amount, a little over $1,800. Based on comments from DWR, they requested some revisions to the invoice. We've made those. They've been submitted, so we're waiting on DWR there. And this is all Prop 1. Invoice 13A, which covers October through December 2021. It's a question amount is a retention amount. It was submitted on it's a small amount, $300. It was submitted on the 28th of February. And then the progress report we've submitted included both Prop 1 and Prop 60 have been provided. On the CRWA conservation project, that's the California Rural Water Association. That's a water conservation component. We finally got the amendment signed in late March, and funds are available to request the additional conservation work. That has to be done by October 31st, 2022. So we're on track there. We did have a call with CRWA. Our staff did back on the 4th to discuss project goals and a work schedule timeline. So we're on the same page with those folks, and things look good there. So that's moving forward. On to the next PowerPoint, which is Prop 68 status update. Invoice 10B, which covers July through March of 2021. Requested payment was almost $3,000. It's been received. Invoice 12B, which covers July through September. Total requested payment is a little over $3,100. We're currently awaiting payment. It's all been approved, so we're just waiting delivery of the money. Invoice 13B, which covers October through December, less than $300. It was submitted on February 28th. And just some information on the, it's kind of, we go over this at each meeting, but as you recall, the award on Prop 68, we requested $330,000 based upon limited funds. DWR awarded $300,000 and indicated when more funds are available, they would consider adding the additional $30,000. They did that. So the amendment was signed in late March, which allowed us to access the additional $30,000 for Prop 68. And also moved our end date back, our completion date back to October 31st. So that's the status of the Prop 1, Prop 68 grant funds. And as I mentioned, we will provide a summary table of all of the funding, invoices and funding that's gone on. We'll provide that at the next meeting. It's not on the agenda, but I'll just give you a quick update. The new Prop 1 funding request, application for funding. This is for primarily, the project is for planning, design, the upfront work for our infrastructure project. It's a significant amount, $7.6 million. It was submitted. It was coordinated with DWR staff. They reviewed a draft of our application. We had a conversation again with DWR staff. As I mentioned, we're working closely with the grant folks at DWR. The discussions with DWR staff were that the application was fine. No changes were requested, so it was submitted as is. We're looking at awards being made for those funds. This is the implementation planning funds. Probably within the next week or 2 weeks, we should get word on award, and we are anxiously awaiting it. We're expecting approval of the funding, so we'll just have to wait and see. On to the next PowerPoint, Recycle Water Program Update. See, Jeff, are you on yet? My Jeff Halsey, I guess he's still not on. I kind of wanted Jeff to do this because he has actually more hands-on knowledge about what's going on here. I think Don Zadiva may be on. He's part of the team. He's been part of the team too, so if he has anything to add, that's certainly welcome. What's been going on here is the technical team had a conference call as early as April 6th. Section 4 of the draft report, which include disinfection, nitrate removal, similar capacity, the salt nutrient management plan update, direct potable reuse timelines, included components of the recycled water program were received and reviewed. And then a review was done amongst the technical team in Section 5, which is the screening process for the project. So a lot was accomplished on that meeting. I just want to add, I'd asked Jeff to mention this, so I'll mention it myself. I know there's a lot been said about where the water district's going, where the groundwater authority is going, and all of that is, we set that aside. I'll just tell you that the water district and the technical staff at the water district, along with the city and the groundwater authority, we're all working very well cooperatively on this project, and the direction that we're going, I think everybody's good with, and we're all on the same page about where we're trying to go with the most efficient and most effective use of recycled water under this program. So, I've got a quick note. The screening process, primarily the conclusion is the injection, which is what the water district wants to do anyway. The screening process has come out in the draft report, at least, as the most technically practical and feasible project for the recycled water. So that's where we're at. So next steps. The next steps are to schedule a meeting with the regional board for input on injection projects and water quality concerns. These regulations, we know what they are currently, but frankly, they're all over the map. And with SGMA and the water conditions we've got in the state, they're going to be changing all the time. So we need to get current information on what the requirements can be, what level of treatment we're going to have to apply to this recycled water, what our travel times, what our holding times are going to be, how far away from wells, production wells we can be. All of that's going to have to be reviewed with the regional board. So we'll be setting up a call to discuss that with their technical staff, excuse me. We will finalize section 5, discussing results of the screening process after review with the technical team. And then we'll start working on defining the injection projects and working on the storage needs for the water, additional treatment needs that are required to meet the regulatory requirements. All of those will be involved in our next steps and will result in a follow-up technical meeting with all of the staff. So that's where we're at on the recycled water. As I said, things are moving along well. And I apologize. One of the things I'd ask, if Jeff Helsley comes on, I can ask to see if he has an update. But I had asked for generally an update as to where we think we're going to be able to pull this all together and release a draft report on the recycled water program to the public. I haven't got that, but I commit to bring it back in the main meeting and let you know going forward how long we think it's going to take to pull this together and be able to produce a draft final report with some final direction on the recycled water program. So with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is miscellaneous items. They're really not miscellaneous, they're very important. But anyway, Jean will pick up the next 3 items, and they're primarily updates. Jean?
Good morning. The few items that I have are updates for technical work that is being done within the Indian Wells Valley groundwater basin. The first one is the groundwater dependent ecosystems. As I reported last month, the Navy biologist was going out to evaluate a number of sites. There were 4 sites that we had chosen last fall to evaluate during the spring when vegetation would be in bloom. He has gone out to visit them, and there looks like there's a potential for 2 new sites. And our next step is to pair those up with existing monitoring wells and nearby monitoring wells to set up this complete monitoring program for groundwater dependent ecosystems. The next slide. The Rose Valley subflow, there were 2 wells that we have designed to drill to develop a gradient and a estimate to be able to physically estimate the subflow from Rose Valley toward the main groundwater basin. The status of that is we still do not have a signed contract with the Navy, but we've been working on the funding piece, which is called SAMS.gov, for federal money to be awarded to the Groundwater Authority.
And on the 7th, just last week, April did receive the final cage code that is required for that part. We still are working with the Navy in terms of getting that contracting approval. We don't have it yet, so we're not drilling yet. And with discussions with biologists that we're working with the site, and then part of our BLM permit and endangered species, we have been delayed from February, and we're looking at placing that drilling into the fall. Another element of that is that the cost of piping has gone up, and the actual supplies for drilling the well have gone up. So we are looking at subcontractor bid packages to see how we are going to address those changes of cost. The next slide. The groundwater model that was the Navy's groundwater model that was then developed by the GA for the submittal of the GSP is going to be requiring some updates prior to the 5-year report that's due in January 2025. So the timeline for this is this year we're working with the configuration management plan for the model, and that is we are starting it off on April 18th, which is next Monday. We're going to have a technical meeting with the water resource manager, the Navy's new representative, and Desert Research Institute. On last month, on the 17th of March, the Navy appointed a new technical person for the TAC, and her name is Donna Ogilvie, and she is available for this meeting next month. The next slide. This is not directly on the agenda, but it sort of follows up with the field work that's been done. In the second week of March, third week of March, the groundwater levels were monitored. And I want to report that the last number of that table that's on your slide, that we were able to collect 154 groundwater level measurements this March. The map shows the distribution of the water levels. In addition, it's probably hard to see on this scale, but there's smaller dots. Those smaller dots are wells that we were not able to get to, and we are planning on addressing those through this spring and into the summer. Most of those are domestic wells that we were not able to get access to. These are wells that haven't been accessed, some of them since 2008, some of them since 2012. We are going through an evaluation, and we put it in the annual report. We listed out these wells. We put it in the report, the annual report to DWR, how we are going to be addressing the groundwater monitoring program. If you look at this table, the most water level measurements just before COVID were 143 water levels. So we have improved, but mostly because we've added additional wells into the monitoring program. You can see the other numbers of fall and spring monitoring data that we have, and you can see the hit that COVID not having access to wells or staff to go out and measure. We were down to 55 measurements in spring of 2020, 88 in fall of 2020, and then we were slowly climbing up, but we're now clearly back into a full monitoring program. But we do plan on cleaning up some of the details of the monitoring program that we have wells that we have full access to. The next steps are reviewing the data and posting it to the Sigma portal, developing contour maps for the water year 2022 annual report, and to also post the data and contour maps on the DMS. I'm not sure if people have gone to the data management system website for the GA, but we have now posted depth to water maps on that website. Those are new. Prior, we just had the latest contour interval as elevation, but with a depth to water map, it shows how deep you would have to drill a well to hit the water table. If you have time, I recommend going to the DMS and seeing the additional work that's been done on that site. And that's what I have for my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you very much. Appreciate it a lot, the work you're doing. And I just one real quick thing on the Rose Valley wells, just for the board's information and certainly the audience. This is the Navy Coastal Royalty Fund. You all recall that a lot of work was done to access that fund. There are certain requirements to identify projects. It's a pretty rigorous process to get a project to come to the top of the heap. We work with the TAC on projects. We certainly have to work with the Navy, and finally a project maybe gets selected. So it takes quite a bit of effort to get a project to come to the top of the heap and then get the Navy to actually authorize it. That was done with Rose Valley. There are still procedural things that are required that I think we're all getting used to, including the Navy. And in this case, Jean pointed out the contracting mechanism for actually having a driller come out onto the site. And we certainly cannot contract with a driller until we have the groundwater authority's agreement with the Navy completely secured, so we make sure we have authority funding in place before we contract out to a driller. So in Jean's work here, she's trying to fit a lot of different pieces together, including the environmental concerns, when we can drill, when there's habitat issues, and when we can do certain things, and trying to coordinate that along with coordinating competitive bidding from well drillers while we're working on the contractual arrangements. And in this particular case, the delays we've had getting a contract with the Navy to be able to make sure this will all be reimbursed have kicked things so far back, as Jean mentioned. In the meantime, we've got prices from well drillers, and their costs have gone way up on steel prices. So and the procedures for contracting with these well drillers are becoming more clear what we need to do with the groundwater authority. So there will be some backing up and reworking ourselves to shoot for the next run at trying to get these wells drilled. And as Jean mentioned, I think we're shooting for the fall. So just an explanation as to where we've been. A lot of people have asked us, what's going on with those Rose Valley wells? And I just want to assure you that Jean's been working rolled her sleeves up, been working very hard in several different areas to pull all this together and get it done. But we're certainly not going to get out in front of making sure that there is reimbursement in place for the groundwater authority before commitments are made. So anyway, anything else, Jean, at all?
There is one additional thing on just Tuesday. So just yesterday, I guess, the Inyo County did follow the same process that Keith was talking about earlier. They took our well permits and they had their people review it so that it was in line with the new policies that are occurring. And they issued a permit different than other well permits, where it does clearly state that we will not develop these new monitoring wells into any kind of production well or put any new pumping equipment in. So those pieces are also being in place. And Inyo County just completed that, and it took a couple weeks to complete something like that, different than a regular well permit.
Great.
And that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jean. Chairman Peters, I think we're done, and if there's any comments or questions.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on the Water Resource Manager's report? Okay, anybody on the phones? Seeing none. Are there any comments from the members of the board?
I have.
Director Hammond?
This is Director Hammond. And Gene, in regards to the, your last topic on the item 13, spring groundwater level measurements. So what I took from that was that in regards to the past concerns about what the water district has voiced numerous times on the groundwater measurement and data gaps, this addresses that, and that we are currently back on track and gathering actually even more well measurements than we were prior to COVID. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Fantastic. So I just want to say job well done on your behalf and everybody that's been working on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Hammond. Any other comments? Director Rotorua?
Yes, I have. On that last view graph, I was curious how many wells how many wells were planned to be measured but weren't actually measured? Do you know?
It is about 20 or 25.
About 25?
Correct. And they are wells that haven't been measured in the past either, but that are still on the books, so to speak. And we're working with Michelle to go out and gain some access to some of these wells. And it's mostly to do with domestic wells. Properties change, locks on gates change, and also some pumping equipment changes. And when that occurs, sometimes you can't get a sounder down. So at one well, the well was rehabbed, but now there's no access for a sounder to go down without being mixed up with the pump wiring or equipment. So we need to clean up some of those and also do some outreach to neighbors if we're missing, if there's like a hole in an area that we really would like, a gap in an area that we really would like a well. So that's what we ran into. But yes, that's how many wells we did not measure.
Okay, thank you. There are, as I recall, 41 wells, specific wells that were needed to be able to measure the storage loss. Were all 41 of those measured?
They were, with an extra trip going out. They were all measured.
They were all measured. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
One last thing. On the view graph, it shows the next steps. It does not include calculation of a groundwater storage loss. And I'm curious why that wasn't one of your first next steps.
We are actually underway doing that. That's more a annual report item, and I was only reporting on the data itself. But yes, we have, once these steps are done, the contour maps, we are looking at developing the change in storage. We are actually looking at two different methods. One is, as we develop these contours, putting them into a finer grid and using GIS to calculate that change in storage. And then the other method is the Tucson polygon. So we are going to be developing those and then reviewing them with the TAC So that part is already started.
Okay. Do you have a timeline for achieving that by any chance?
No, I don't, but I would expect that we would be achieving that by the summer.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Appreciate it. A comment on I guess earlier, not necessarily a slide, but a comment that was made, I believe, by Steve in the 2021 annual report. I compared the final version with the draft version, and I didn't actually notice a lot of changes or a lot of impact of any of the comments that were made. I guess I was hoping that maybe there would be more included in the document based upon the comments that were made against it. They weren't, although quite frankly, my feeling is that the actual value of the document, once we weren't able to read the 41 wells that we needed to calculate the storage loss, probably minimized the benefit to the water district. That's one of the water loss and the storage loss is a critical issue, and it's something that obviously you know I'm interested in. I've been harping on it now for months, but I appreciate the fact that we're now, it looks like, going forward and doing something. One last comment is based upon some discussion from the last month's meeting, I thought we were going to be presented with a schedule regarding how we were going to address the 19 deficiencies that were in the GSP. And there were also a lot of items in the response to the 2020 annual report comments that Eugene made in terms of what we were going to do to help. And so I was actually hoping to see a schedule on how we're going to address all of these things to make sure that we get everything done in a timely manner and that we also have a budget that's compatible with all the tasks that we need to do. Because obviously the time always gets ahead of us, and we need to have a schedule and we need to have a budget. And I'm hoping that next meeting we'll have that schedule on how we're actually going to address all those deficiencies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay. Our next item is the general manager's report, and for that we will turn to April.
Thank you, Chairman Peters. First, we will take a look at the monthly financial report for the month of March. Everything is pretty similar, updated just with the recent expenditures and revenues, but some notable action within the report is the first installment payment to Kern County to start repayment for the advance of funds has been delivered. So we have started the $125,000 for the first payment out of the $500,000 that will be paid by the end of the year. Second, I would like to take you to the ending balance for the month of March. You'll see there are two balances, one in the Kern County Treasurer, one in Mission Bank. We did have some revenue that came in towards the end of the month that we wanted to reflect in this report and not have the money in transition between the bank and Kern County. So between those two balances and then subtracting the outstanding warrants that were paid, there is an available cash balance of just over $3.2 million. Switching over to the Capital Core report, I will highlight a few items, but Jeff Simonetti is available should you have any further questions. The Task 1 negotiations for an import water supply are still underway. The wastewater treatment plant and the National Defense Authorization Act. There's advocacy strategies concerning Defense Community Infrastructure Program. were developed and launched in February. This activity would amend the current DCIP to allow projects sited upon federal lands but otherwise owned and operated and maintained by a defense community, such as Ridgecrest, to be eligible under the program. Capital Corps is working through the Association of Defense Communities to prioritize the amendment. And as well, they are advocating for increases in appropriations to the program and continued reauthorization of DCIP for future use by the interconnection project. Also noted the water recycling plant is eligible under the resiliency criteria. However, discussions over the project's military value, which are prioritized under the statute, need to be explored. Going down to task 3, Capital Corps formally has submitted the City of Ridgecrest state budget request in March for consideration by Assemblymember Fong and Senator Grove. Member Fong has reached back out to Capital Corps and will be sponsoring the budget request for the wastewater treatment facility. This is a positive development because if it is passed as proposed, it may lead to a $5 million appropriation for the facility. March also marked the kickoff for the fiscal year 2022 and 2023 state budget discussions in Sacramento. As proposed, $5.1 billion in water infrastructure funding contained within the governor's budget's request. Major priorities for the GA will include Sigma IP Round 2, funding for critically overdrafted basins, DWR multi-benefit program funding, as well as State Water Resource Control Board water recycling program funding. A notable kind of in the last paragraph, a debate of DWR's handling of Sigma IP funding requests during round 1 has been kind of tossed around. There's been push by many to ensure a more competitive grant progress for Sigma IP funding. Understandably, Capital Corps recommends the authority oppose such efforts and maintain funding priorities methodology used during the round 1 process. A staff meeting is currently being scheduled to determine funding priorities for Sigma IP Round 2 funding and should it be appropriated by the legislature. And with that, those are the updates.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, any questions or comments from the board?
Yes, I have a question on, I was kind of expecting to see the audit in this meeting. You know, this is the, 16th month following the end of the fiscal year. Is there reason to believe that we might see an audit next month for the 2020 annual budget year?
I believe so. And Gina can correct me if I'm wrong, but discussions with Brown Armstrong, they have stated that we should have it by the end of this month. They do have everything that they need to conduct the audit, but I believe we mentioned back in February that they've had some staffing issues due to COVID, as well as just people transitioning to new firms. So they're a little short-staffed and going as fast as they can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. We will move on now to our next item, which is item number 15, the PAC and the TAC report. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Janis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The PAC met this month, and we had a very, I think, a productive meeting. We had one major topic, and that was review the communication and engagement plan recommended corrective action that DWR provided in their approval of the groundwater sustainability plan, and that was recommended corrective action number 1. And we had postponed reviewing this since we wanted more clarity in what the interpretation of the words in the staff report and then the words in the final recommendation were. And we got that clarity, and I'll summarize it by saying the recommendation from DWR was to update the communication and engagement plan, focus on 3 areas: the key elements for public communication and engagement, how to engage all stakeholders. There were both the specific user or pumper groups that we have traditionally recognized as the stakeholder groups, and then called for in the state water code was to also consider the diverse social, cultural, and economic groups within the basin. and update that for the GSP implementation and execution rather than the GSP development, which is what the focus of the entire communication engagement plan was on, the process of developing the GSP. And so now it's about focusing on the implementation and how to ensure stakeholders' engagement in that process, and the key elements in execution that specifically relate to the elements of execution within the groundwater sustainability plan. And those are largely 95% covered within sections 5 and 6 of the GSP plan. Section 5 is the projects and management actions, and section 6 is the implementation plan. We had a lot of discussion, and I'll come back to that after I let you know what our action taken was and the path forward taken on this. Having decided that, or having agreed that we wanted to take a shot at this, as tasked by yourselves, the board, we said 2 weeks or 2 weeks or 4 weeks even before the next meeting was not a time to get our thoughts together, either individually or then collectively. So we said we would like to postpone that until the May meeting and have 6 full weeks of consideration of all the documents we're going to be reviewing, and I'll talk about those in a second, and then do individual review comments. And individual review comments would be provided to the chair, and I would distribute the chair at the time of this board meets next month, so that the PAC members would then have 2 weeks to look at the individuals, other individual comments, and come together to deliberate about what we might recommend as a whole PAC at that May meeting. So the action we took are summarized on the second page of the report there. Provide additional individual member comments in a 2-page summary, a digestible format, to the chair for full PAC distribution and review not later than 11th of May, the next date the GA board meets. Recommendations should include there were 3 major questions. How can and should the stakeholders be involved in the GSP implementation process and be informed of the implementation progress? Primarily address this from the perspective of key elements and stakeholder engagement regarding GSP sections 5 and 6, the projects and management actions and the implementation plan. Second task, what changes are recommended to the C&E plan to incorporate and instantiate these? There are many things that could be recommended that wouldn't have to go into a plan, but there are many that might. What should the PAC timetable be? This is the third task. Our understanding of the task, or the ask out of DWR, was that this is to be periodically reevaluated as the GSP evolves and the GSP implementation evolves. We fill the data gaps, we move on to new projects, et cetera. So what would be the PAC timetable to periodically reevaluate the stakeholder engagement needs based on the GA tasks and projects being implemented? So with that in mind, that's the individual member tasks. We'll get those in by the next meeting and distribute them to PAC, and we'll take up as an action at our May meeting to assimilate those and then start discussing as a group what we would recommend it as a group. And I won't commit that we would be able to get full agreement in that one meeting on all these subjects, but we'll take a shot at it. And it may take a couple meetings, and we have time, since the main ask out of DWRs that we update these, and these be a part of the plan updates that are done periodically. Now, during the discussion, there were several really good points brought up and recommendations. One of them was that Don Zadiba suggested we look at the other. There were 8 critically overdrafted basins that actually had approved plans by DWR, and we look at those other 7 plans to see what was maybe missing or brought to mind as additional considerations that we might not have thought of, perhaps. And in fact, recognizing that DWR had approved those other plans, there would be some goodness in that. Additionally, we have previously Don had also provided the the Owens Valley plan, which did have some differences, and some of our members thought some of those were really spot on in addressing these kinds of requests from DWR. So we're going to review that plan. So we're going to be reviewing the relevant documentation from the DWR request itself, our existing C&E plan, 8 other C&E plans, and combining them into our individual recommendations. And that was a lot of the reason for wanting to have 6 weeks to go do this and be effective, provide something that would be effective. Another thing I wanted to point out and be my final comment, all members noted that the recommendations the PAC provided out of our January meeting to this board at the last meeting were relevant to this task. So those were perhaps forward-looking and spot on with what the DWR wanted, and specifically, or especially, the fact sheets and the integrated overall schedule. So that's what I wanted to emphasize, that you don't have to wait for us to come up with the next things we're doing. We want to emphasize that you have some recommended fact sheets, and I imagine out of this, key projects, management actions, and the implementation plan schedule, there will be additional ones. So we're going to be building on that additional set of recommendations we provided a couple of board meetings ago. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Janis. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a public comment on the PAC and TAC report. Okay, not seeing any. Thank you again, Mr. Janis. The date of our next meeting is going to be May 11th, 2022. And with that, we will adjourn.